We're going to be taking a look at 5 decks to survive until the mini set comes out later next week. By survive, I basically just mean these are decks that you can play and you don't necessarily lose games and lose all of your ranks. So all of these decks are going to have a positive win rate, at least in the experience of yours truly. I'm going to break down each deck as far as the cards in the deck, what it does. I'm going to give you the general game plan for the deck, as well as the mulligan for the deck. Basically, by the time you're watching this video, you're going to have all of the basic information you need to be able to grab one of these decks, hit the ladder, and survive until the mini set releases. First deck we're going to take a look at is actually Aya Rogue. Aya, the Lotus Kingpin, was buffed in the most recent balance patch. As you can see here, it now gives 3 coins instead of just 2. And that enables us to have a little bit of a different game plan with this particular deck. And I think one of the things that we're going to be focusing on when we're playing this deck is that we're going to be going for the Jade coin to summon Jade Guardians, or as you can actually see here, just Jade Golems. The game plan for this deck is we want to be able to get down Aya as early as possible. We also want to get paid and start getting plenty of coins in our hand. Aya is going to be able to help with that. You'll notice that the deck is also going to be running 2 copies of Agents of the Old Ones. We can take cards in our hand that have less value in the matchup that we're in. We will be able to turn those cards into coins. We're also going to be running Lotus Bookies for the additional coins. Again, thinking about getting paid. Blackpaw's Whip is going to be just a discounted weapon if we are holding coins. You're also going to notice Time Admiral Hooktail here. This is going to allow us to be able to get 8 coins in hand. And Garona's Last Stand, we will actually be able to target that treasure chest to be able to break it. This particular card. That's going to put a lot of coins in our hand, up to 8 if we can actually hold that many. And so the way that we're going to be able to win this deck, it almost feels like a miracle deck. If you've been around Hearthstone for a while, you may remember decks that prioritized cards like Edwin or Sinful Graveyard, and it's going to play a little bit like that thanks to the inclusion of the Defias Wannabe. Prepare card, combo gain 1/1 for each other card played this turn. If we're able to play a bunch of coins, that will enable us to play even more additional cards. And these Defias Wannabes can get pretty big, 12-12, 16-16, 18-18. You can get very big minions on the board, and sometimes you can actually get 2 of these down for 2 very, very big minions. Also, if our draw does not hit like the Defias Wannabes, and maybe we miss on the Aya, we also have the capability of just playing Ashmane. So if we get down the Admiral Hooktail, break open the chest, get lots and lots of coins, and we have Ashmane in hand, we can just dump the coins, play the Ashmane, and then basically take over our opponent's deck at a discounted cost, and basically just use their win condition to be able to win the game from there. Also important to note here, we're running Deadly Bribes. This is going to be able to help us remove a big threat on the board. It's going to give us an additional way to get paid and get a coin. And it does have the small downside of our opponent getting a coin, but we're likely more interested in getting coins for ourselves. And once we do get down the Aya Lotus Kingpin, taking the Jade Golem reward, it's just going to allow us to be able to trickle out larger and larger Jade Golems. 1/1 very quickly turns into 5/5 and 6/6 if we have a fistful of coins here. So the deck is really just all about creating big minions, whether they come from the Aya reward and the Jade Golems, or just from Defias Wannabes on the board, and sometimes even just our opponent's minions being able to play out onto the board very, very cheaply. So the deck is going to have multiple win conditions, and the fun of the deck is going to be figuring out the best way to be able to win with the cards that you have in hand and the cards that you've been able to draw in that particular game. The mulligan for this deck, we would be looking to keep the Kingslayer weapon. We're also going to be keeping Aya Lotus Kingpin, and believe it or not, we're actually going to keep Time Admiral Hooktail. Just the coins and the coin rewards are going to be very, very important for this deck, be able to give us the opportunity to be able to win the game. Next up on my pick of decks to play to survive until the mini set is going to be Logosh Warrior. This has actually been kind of like a pet deck for me for several weeks now. I really just enjoy Logosh Warrior, and I think the deck has definitely gotten better in light of the recent nerfs, with Hunter and Shaman being slowed down and Rogue being slowed down and or toned down. It gives more time for this deck to be able to draw cards, survive, and get to the point that you just have kind of an overwhelming late game in the form of all of the blood fighters that are going to be here. So largely what the deck is going to revolve around is, of course, just going to be the Blood Fighters. This is our main win condition. The vast majority of wins that we get with this deck is going to come from just very big Blood Fighters on the board. Keep in mind that as the Blood Fighters are being pulled out of your hand, they're going to get that 5/5 buff, so we will have 12 12s on the board. And with the Chainbreaker Hogger, we're actually copying all 3 Blood Fighters. That gives us a total of 6 Blood Fighters, and in most matchups, that's going to be more than enough value to be able to win. And oftentimes with the Blood Fighters, even having just 2 or 3 Blood Fighters is going to be enough to be able to win the game if we can get that many Blood Fighters in hand. I call it a chain of Blood Fighters, where even if your opponent is able to remove 1 Blood Fighter, an additional Blood Fighter comes out of the hand. And then certainly the Valera being elusive and untargetable gives decks a lot of problems when it comes to clearing up this minion. You can also get some interesting creative lethals out of your Blood Fighters. Something to watch out for with Nightmare Lord Xavius is if you can get one of your Blood Fighters with charge. Basically, I had a lethal one time. My opponent was at 24. I think I had a Logosh Blood Fighter that was on the board, and I had a Broll that had a Dark Gift of charge. And so with the Logosh, I think I actually played the Logosh first, traded it into a minion on the board, and then made it so that my opponent had no minions on the board. The Broll came out as a 12/12 and attacked face because of the Logosh effect, and then it also had charge, and I was able to attack face again. So certainly with the Nightmare Lord Xavius, a Blood Fighter with charge is very, very powerful. If you need a way to be able to win the game, sometimes you may need something a little bit more defensive off of the Dark Gift coming from the Lord Xavius, but something to keep in mind there. And certainly the Blood Fighter is going to be very overpowering for the majority of decks in the format, if not all of them. The other way that we can win with this deck is sometimes you just get a lot of face damage early, usually from Erupting Volcanoes. If you get 2 of these locations down on the board early in the game, sometimes just playing fire spells like Torch, Searing Fissure, Shadow Flame Suffusion activates the location, and if you're also using those spells to clear the board and then you click 1 or even 2 locations in the same turn, you can actually just get a lot of early face damage. And then being able to get the double Warp Tooth out onto the board with the charging damage, sometimes buffed with like the Sanguine Depths on a Warp Tooth, you can actually just find yourself killing your opponents before you ever even make it to the Blood Fighter phase. Also included in the deck, Precursory Strikes that can go face, and Searing Fissure can also allow your hero to attack face, and of course Axe of the Forefathers as a weapon can go face. So there will be games where your opponent's a little bit slow, they're not doing anything, not developing minions on the board, and you can actually just create lethal situations with the other smaller cards in your deck before you ever get into the Blood Fighters. General game plan for the deck is we want to maintain our health total early. You don't want to take too much damage and lose the game before we get to our really powerful late game. We're also going to want to get Warp Tooth out, hopefully around turn 4, turn 5 at the latest. It's not possible every game, but typically Mother Duck will allow you to be able to get your Warp Teeth out onto the board. It's usually going to take some type of a 2-card combo in order to activate this, unless you can get something like an Acolyte of Pain to stick on the board to trade into an opponent's minion. Usually it'll end up being like Mother Duck with an already equipped Axe of the Forefathers. You can attack with the 3 rushers off of the Mother Duck, then attack with Axe of the Forefathers so that the AoE hits the duck, and then out come your Warp Teeth. One thing you want to keep in mind with that play is that depending on how you sequence your turn, if you swing your hero into a minion, your hero taking damage will pull out the double Warp Tooth, and then the Axe of the Forefather AoE will go off, and you can actually deal 1 damage to both of your Warp Teeth. It's not ideal. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but there are situations where you can play around that particular thing. So early in the game, protecting our health total, drawing cards with things like Acolyte of Pain. Precursory Strike will draw a minion as long as you're holding a minion that costs 5 or more. And then we're also running like Eternal Toils and Slams. Still just thinking about being able to draw cards towards our stronger late game and being able to activate Warp Tooth. Obviously, Lord Xavius will also draw cards, specifically minions, that are most likely going to be Blood Fighters, just because of the amount of minions that we have in the deck being a smaller amount. Turn 4, turn 5, get the Mother Duck down and be able to summon the double Warp Tooth. And then once you get around turn 6 on the coin or turn 7, it's time to start playing Blood Fighters. In a lot of matchups, Only 2 Blood Fighters is going to be enough to be able to get you there. Just having 1 Blood Fighter, and then when it dies, you get the 12-12 out. That can be enough damage to win the game. In some matchups, depending on how the game is going and how much health your opponent has left, you may need to wait until you have 3 or even 4 Blood Fighters in hand before you commit to the board with a Blood Fighter, unless basically your back is against the wall and you're just going to be dying before you have the opportunity to wait and accumulate additional Blood Fighters. General mulligan for the deck, we're going to be keeping the Sanguine Depths. We would also be keeping the Mother Duck, as well as Nightmare Lord Xavius. Deck number 3 that I've really been enjoying since this latest balance patch, none other than Attack Druid. I've slightly updated the list since one of my videos. I think sometime in the last week I had a video about Attack Druid. You're going to notice that I did finally give up on Gen, Cursed King. I still really like the card. It was always active in this version of the deck that I've been running, but I've actually just decided to replace it with an Amir Drasil, largely because of card draw. There were a lot of games where it just felt like I needed more cards in hand to be able to find a way to finish my opponent, and even though that deck was performing well and I really like Gen as a card, it's always nice to be able to play different cards. I think Amir Drasil just kind of wins out in that particular thing. Basically, if you don't draw Staff of Trickery, we have a little bit of redundancy with Amir Drasil. Be able to get extra resources in hand. That's something very important in most Hearthstone games. Make sure that you have the resources to be able to finish your opponent. One of the things that separates this list from other lists that you may see around the internet, we're not running Elise. I am not a big fan of this card. I have not been a fan of this card since it was nerfed and all the locations were touched up a little bit and addressed. I don't think it's worth running anymore. That's just me personally. Feel free to make your own choice if you disagree. And let me know in the comments if you think that I'm making a mistake by not running the card. And so, but typically you'll see if people are going to be running the Elise, most likely I think what other decks do is they cut both Brood Watchers, and then you would run something like a Life Bloom. Or you'll sometimes see people running Ysera in the deck as well for a 9 cost card. That will give you the 10 different cost cards to be able to run that Elise if you so choose. With this particular deck, the general game plan for the deck is basically we want to attack with our hero as many turns as possible, basically just building up our Infest the Scullery, and also that damage being able to trade for minions on the board as well as soften up our opponent is just going to be able to make it easier to win the game. We also want to look to ramp with this deck. We're running 2 copies Acceleration Aura, 2 copies of Felwood Treant. Druid's certainly a very, very powerful class when it's able to ramp, get extra mana on your opponent. And one of the power plays for the deck is always just going to be Wicker Gang. If you can get this down early, anywhere from turn 3, even all the way up to turn 6, as you would naturally expect to play it. Just very, very powerful, and this one card can actually just blow decks out entirely if they don't have an answer already lined up for it, especially if you get that rare, turn 3, turn 4 Wicker Gang. You can really just finish off your opponent rather easily just with this one particular card. And then as we move later into the game, we just want to develop a large board, either from the Wicker Gang, from the Infest the Scullery, from the minions that are going to be coming down off of this. And keep in mind here, sometimes a big board is like 6 cost minions off of Infest the Scullery. If you are, for some reason, on turn 3 or turn 4, able to play this for 2/5 or 2/6 cost minions, it can go a long way to just winning the game. Depending on the matchup, if your opponent is AFK, not doing anything, sometimes those 5 and 6 cost minions times 2, it's just going to be enough to be able to get there. So don't feel like you always have to wait to be able to get 8, 9, 10 mana cost minions off of this. Play your hand, play the particular game that you're in, and really just look for ways to be able to finish off your opponent. I would argue as well that Brood Watcher is going to be a good way to be able to develop a large board. 2 3/3s and a 4/5 are nothing to sneeze at, especially if your opponent is just a little bit slow. And if nothing else, they can get some damage, some trades on the board potentially, and just buy you time to be able to get into additional things. And then you can also just get big stuff off of your Staff of the Trickery to be able to develop these large boards. Another feature of this particular deck, just highly discounted Druid cards can be very, very powerful. And then we never want to forget about Bashana Rune Totem and Marithra of the Dream. These cards allow us to do some pretty powerful things. Bashana Rune Totem actually surprised me when this card was revealed. I didn't think it was going to be all that good. I think Bashana has more than proven itself to be a very, very powerful card with some potential to be able to swing games in our favor. And then, of course, the Marithra. If you watched my previous video on Attack Druid, you'll know that this card, it just puts a lot of value in your hand. And depending on your hand and the things that are going on in the game, you don't always have to wait for this to be active to play it. Sometimes just the 4/12 body and getting dragons in hand, resources in hand, be able to find a way to win the game can be especially powerful. If, however, it is active, there's a lot of games that you just win on the spot because you're able to overwhelm your opponents with very, very large boards because of how cheap these particular dragons are. And sometimes, you'll even get lucky and hit something like a Briar Spawn Drake or the dragon with the Rewind. I think it's called Chrono Flux, but it is a 7-cost dragon. Conflux Crasher. Sometimes you can hit one of these, deal 7 face, so on and so forth. So a few different ways to be able to win with this particular deck as far as just creating these very, very powerful boards. And then we don't want to forget that we have the option of just being able to swing face and hit our opponent with things like Widow's Bites, the weapon, secret ingredients, so on and so forth. Mulligan for this deck, we would be looking to keep Spiderlings. We are also going to be keeping the Fellwood Treants. We would also keep Staff of Trickery as well as the Wicker Gang. Deck number 4 on my list of decks to be able to survive until the mini set comes out. It's actually just going to be Leyline Mage. This was an archetype that came out. It's something that I've really enjoyed playing over the course of the last, I think it's been a couple of months now. The deck has always felt like it's been close. I think it's finally come to a point now that the average person would call this deck playable, and that you're probably going to be able to win more games than you lose with the deck. And if you like the Leyline playstyle, Leyline Mage is more than good enough for you to consider playing at this point on the ladder. Taking a closer look at the deck now, it is a little bit different than it used to be. We do know that Trixie Improviser is going to be included in this particular list. This card was recently buffed. 2 random mage secrets can actually be pretty powerful depending on the mage secrets that you hit here. Certainly it can go a long way in terms of like Ice Armor, Counterspell, Oasis Ally, among some of the other mage secrets. Flames of Infinity, just to be able to remove a big minion on the board. The fact that it has the Prepare keyword means that we can get this ready earlier and be able to cheat it out. If you watch my recent Leyline Mage video, just keep in mind you do have to play a spell for this to be active. That misplay still bothers yours truly, even a little bit now because of how silly it was. And then, of course, Volcanoes has also been buffed. It now does a 3 damage AoE. When I first saw this buff, I thought it was a little bit silly. I didn't think that, I was like, the heck is going on around here? Why would you buff this card? But it's been a pleasant surprise. The 3 AoE is nice. And then Volcanoes, you sometimes just clear the board, even keep the board clear. If you're seeing a lot of problems with Z Shaman, sometimes you get this down, and it just kind of keeps those pesky smaller boards at bay. And generates extra value with the fire spells. They're going to be coming from the plumes that are created by the Volcanoes here. General game plan for this particular deck. In the early game, we really want to buff our ley lines, which is going to come in the form of playing Mystic Runesaber, the Ley Walker, as well as the Surge Needle. But you do want to be a little bit careful. We always have to protect our health total with this deck. It's a little bit slow if you're just going to curve out 2 into 3 into 4. It's certainly very powerful, but because these cards do not have Rush and do not have Taunt, they have no way to really protect us. They're easily removed because they're low health, especially in the form of the Ley Walker and the Mystic Runesaber. And so sometimes you can just take a beating early, so you may have to make other plays like Sleet Storm defensively, Cold Snap defensively. So be careful. Having the 2 into 3 into 4, always really, really powerful, but sometimes you take too much damage in the early game. So prioritize buffing ley lines. Just make sure you don't take too much damage in that process. And then as the ley lines get buffed, we're just going to be looking to win the game with burst damage from like bursting ley lines or very, very big boards created by crystallized ley line. And that's largely going to come along with the help of Khadgar, basically just being able to get additional minions out onto the board as we play this crystallized ley line. So it can be very easy to get, 4 or even 6, say 8 drops out onto the board, assuming we can play the Khadgar and be able to play the crystallized ley line. You're also going to notice this particular version of the deck running 2 copies of Eternal Firebolt, and this is kind of a nod towards what I was speaking on just a moment ago about protecting your health total. Having 2 copies of this allows us removal in the early, mid, and even late game with the Eternal Firebolts. We can heal up a little bit of damage, and then that's going to allow us more time to be able to get into some of our more powerful Leyline plays. So we do have options to be able to play defensively with this deck. Skeleton Key is a great inclusion. It can help you find the card that you need just to be able to survive. You know, maybe it's something like a Blizzard or a Flame Strike, depending on what you're up against. Maybe you just need Burst to be able to finish off your opponent. You could potentially discover something like a Fireball. Keep in mind, there is a 1 in 5 chance when you refresh with this card that you take damage. It's not uncommon that you'll be able to refresh 3, 4, 5 times in a row and take no damage at all. Now, having said that, sometimes you can refresh twice and take 5 damage each time for a total of 10, so you do have to be a little bit careful, but it's just a great emergency button to be able to hit to say, wow, I need some help dealing with this situation, whether it be finding lethal or finding a way to stay alive. Skeleton Key is going to be a great addition to this deck in allowing us a way to, just have that break glass in case of emergency style of situation. General mulligan for this deck, we're always going to be keeping Mystic Runesaber, Ley Walker, as well as the Surge Needle. Being able to curve out the 2, 3, 4 almost feels like a cheat code with this particular deck. Very powerful. Keeping in mind we do need to protect our health total. And then we're actually also going to be keeping the Trixie Improviser. You can almost always find a turn where you have a little bit of extra mana with no better way to spend it than just to prepare this card. And then being able to combine that in a future turn with something small like a Sands of Time, Cold Snap, Sleet Storm, Skeleton Key, or even just like a free Storage Scuffle can allow us to be able to play this and get those 2 Mage Secrets, and really just a lot of value to be had in that, both defensively and sometimes even offensively. Counterspell speaks for itself. Explosive Runes, basically just removal, possibly a little damage on your opponent. Flames of Infinity will remove our opponent's biggest minion. Ice Barrier just gives us extra effective health for the game. Oasis Ally, putting a 3/6 minion on the board, nothing to sneeze at. And Mystic Misdirection, this is basically just removal. It will make your opponent's minion that they choose to attack with first into a cute little 1/1 sheep, rather than something that can deal a bunch of damage to a minion on the board or even to our face. Last but not least, the 5th deck to survive until the mini set, at least my personal picks, it's actually just going to be Quest Hunter. It's a deck that's been around for a while but never saw a lot of meaningful play. I think the deck is maybe in the best spot that it's ever been in. And, you can definitely get out there and still have some fun with Hunter, even though so many of the other Hunter cards have been nerfed. Hunter mains maybe still over in a corner crying because they seem to be repeatedly targeted with nerfs. But Quest Hunter actually performing really well on the ladder, and allows you to do something maybe just a little bit different than we've been doing recently with the Tripwires, and prior to that with Confront the Tol'vir Companion Hunter. This deck is just a little bit different than all of that. Taking a look at the list itself, you're going to notice we have to include lots of minions to be able to complete the food chain, which is going to be playing 1, 3, 5, and 7 attack beasts. So we're going to be running Jeweled Macaws, Platosaurs, and sometimes you'll even see people running a Flutterwing, if I can spell correctly here. Some lists are going to be running like a Paltry Flutterwing in here as well, just to have an additional 1 cost, or rather 1 attack minion. I'll leave that up to you, what you decide to do. It feels like this is largely pretty good in my experience. I do think there's an argument to be made that maybe you do need to run 1 additional 1 attack beast. Then we're also going to be running in our 3 attack beast slot Guard Dogs. Watfin, actually very, very good. This Discover, you can sometimes just discover beasts to help you be able to progress through your quest line. We're also running Rustrot Viper. It's a 3 attack beast first, but then there are still some decks in the meta where you want to break the weapon. Things like Attack Druid and Quest Mage are going to be running weapons. Sometimes Rogues, you might want to break their weapon, or even Demon Hunter. There are some Demon Hunters out there. So sometimes you can actually play this, get credit for the 3 attack beast, and break your opponent's weapon. That's just kind of like a huge, huge bonus. And then for the 5 attack beasts, we're going to be running King Mukla, as well as Ravasor Matriarchs here. And being able to get down that 5 attack is certainly going to go a long way towards completing the quest. 2 copies of Raptor Herald included here. If you were going to run Paltry Flutterwing, we would probably look to cut, I would say, these Raptor Heralds. You could run 1 or 2 copies of Paltry Flutterwing, or if you felt like you needed some additional redundancy for another attack slot to be able to complete the quest, these would be the cards that you'd be looking to cut, the 2 Raptor Heralds here. I like them. Dart Gifts are usually pretty valuable. You're guaranteed to discover a beast and give it a 1-mana discount, and that's going to give us the ability to potentially discover one of the attacks that we have not played yet in that particular game. You could also consider running with this deck, say like an odd map, and that would allow you to be able to discover an odd attack beast. So could potentially cut both Raptor Heralds. So let's say we cut these guys, we throw in an odd map, and then we would throw in the Flutterwing here as well. So the list could look like this. The deck code that is going to be in the description is going to be the one that is running 2 copies of the Raptor Herald. But feel free to make changes with any of these decks. If you think you found a better way or a better list, I would say definitely go for what's working for you. General game plan for the deck: we need to complete this quest as soon as possible and get that quest reward down as quickly as possible. Typically, we don't worry so much about what our opponent is doing or addressing their board. Once you complete the quest, you become extremely powerful with this deck. So we're really more concerned about just playing an odd attack beast that we have not yet gotten credit for as far as this particular quest goes. And then when you actually get down the quest reward, the thing that you want to keep in mind is when you play Shock Jungle Tyrant, the very first discover for any 8 attack beast, he's letting me down. Discover any 8 attack beast is going to be the first discover. There are only 2 8 attack beasts that are in the game, so you don't even get 3 options. We're going to be limited to, I'm not going to be able to pull it up, a Gamagon. That's going to be the Warlock beast that uses your opponent's health to pay for the cost of a card. And then the other one is actually just going to be Krog Crater King. This one I can pull up because it's neutral. And so basically with those 2 options, if you're looking to close out the game and just win, I would say that you take the Agamagon. We're certainly running Shaladrasil as well as Briarspawn Drake. That can be enough damage to just be able to kill your opponent in combination with the Agamagon. That's the choice you're going to take if you're ahead or maybe the game is even. If you're in a more defensive position, you feel like your back is against the wall and you're about to lose the game, you can take Krog Crater King, and this card will allow us to be able to deal with some very big boards by just setting all of our enemy's minions to 1 attack, 1 health. I think the example that I would give of that would be if you're playing against an egg deck and there's a couple of 20/20s on the board, you can just set them down to 1/1s and hopefully find a way to be able to win from there. This is also just a big attack beast as well that you can use to finish your opponent. And even if you take Krog Crater King, we still have Briarspawn Drake and Shaladrasil in the deck to be able to find that lethal damage. And then you can also get some pretty good discovers from the other options off of the food chain as well here, as far as the 6 attack and 4 attack beast. I mean, Omen is a 6 attack beast. That's certainly going to be very powerful. And Evergreen Stag, it's a 6/7 with Elusive and Taunt. It's going to be a good defensive option, and it's just a big body that usually survives and is able to hit your opponent in the face. So that's usually how I will approach playing that quest reward. And obviously the reward itself, Shock is going to have Rush, so the turn that we play it, we'll be able to remove our opponent's biggest threat. And so it's also kind of like a stabilizing play as well. So we definitely want to complete the quest, get the quest reward down, and then just make wise choices for the situation that we're in from game to game. That decision is probably going to look just a little bit different. General mulligan for this particular deck is we would be looking to keep the Guard Dog, we would be looking to keep Watfin as well as King Mukla, and Ravasaur Matriarch also has really good stats when keeping it in the mulligan. So those 4 cards are going to be the cards that we would be keeping for the mulligan in this particular deck. And those are the 5 decks that I'm going to be playing to survive until the mini set comes out later next week. I think these decks are fun. They have a few different play styles to be able to keep us satisfied until that mini set launches. And all of the decks are a little bit fresh. You know, it's not stuff that's been played a lot before. A Rogue, certainly a little bit different than other Rogue decks that have been played. Logosh Warrior's been around, but hasn't really been played a whole lot. Attack Druid seems relatively new. Not a whole lot of people were playing that in the past. Leyline Mage making a comeback, but this was just a fun deck already for me, so I don't mind that. And then Quest Hunter, again, it's something just a little bit new, a little bit different. I believe all of these decks are going to win more games than they lose. And so if you're playing Hearthstone for a specific rank, then I think you can queue these decks up and you don't have to necessarily worry about donating ranks to your opponents. And if you play Hearthstone to have fun, which is usually what I'm doing, I find these decks to be particularly enjoyable at this point in time. We have a very small window before we get an additional new meta in Hearthstone, as that mini set is going to be coming close. So definitely looking forward to that as well. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.